Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Crop Planning for Vegetable Growers. My name is Margot Hale, and I'm the Southeast Regional Director at the National Center for Appropriate Technology, more commonly known as NCAT. NCAT is a national nonprofit organization with 6 regional offices across the country. We work on issues pertaining to sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy, and sustainable communities. Today's webinar will focus on planning crop production to meet market needs. NCAT Agriculture Specialist Luke Freeman is going to help us understand how to plan crops to meet production goals and fulfill wholesale contracts. The webinar is being broadcast by NCAT and is funded by a grant from USDA's Outreach and Assistance to Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. Today's presentation will be about an hour long, including time for questions from you all who are attending. As you're listening, you can type in any questions you might have in the questions box on your screen. I'll compile them and have Luke answer as many questions as we have time for following his presentation. Please don't hesitate to ask questions during the webinar. Chances are we won't be able to get to all of them during the webinar, but Luke or other NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialists will get back to you about your questions via email in the days to come. And the next hour or so isn't the only chance for you to ask questions. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on NCAT's ATRA webpage, www.ncat.atra.org. There's a feature on the page, Ask an Ag Expert, where you can send us emails with any questions you may have. Or you might want to call our Sustainable Ag helpline number, 800-346-9140. We welcome your questions on any sustainable ag subject, not just today's webinar. And it's worth mentioning that it's a free service. If you didn't get that phone number or web address, don't worry. We'll have it on screen at the end of the webinar. Also, before we begin, I just want to remind our viewers to take a few minutes to complete the survey for today's webinar. When the webinar is over and you sign out, you'll get the survey right away. The survey will help us improve our webinars in the future, and we appreciate your taking part in it. Today's presenter, Luke Freeman, has a background in sustainable vegetable and small fruit production. Luke's areas of expertise include organic specialty crop production, high tunnels, cover crops, and crop planning. Luke and his wife own a farm in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where they raise laying hens, goats, vegetables, and cut flowers.
Hi, this is Luke, and I'm a Sustainable Ag Specialist at NCAT. I'll be discussing crop planning and scheduling in this webinar with a focus on scaling into wholesale markets. Feel free to get in touch through my contact information shown here if you have any questions about this topic. Also, we'll be making available the list of resources mentioned in the webinar when we post the recorded webinar to our website, so you will have access to all the links. In this lesson, I will present information to help you understand the importance of farm planning and record keeping, how you can plan your crops to meet production goals and wholesale contracts, how to calculate planting dates based upon an anticipated date of harvest, and how to keep key records that will assist in future production planning. Before we jump into crop planning, I want to take a minute to step back and look at the context of your farming operation. The Farm Business Plan is a way for you to intentionally set the goals and values of your farm and to ensure that everyone involved in the farm is on the same page. Developing a farm business plan can be broken down into 5 steps. 1. Knowing your values and the values of the other stakeholders in the farm. You can start by asking yourself, what's important to me? 2. Understanding your situation and the resources you can leverage to run a successful farm enterprise. 3. Creating a mission statement and goals that serve as the vision for your business and the compass to keep you pointed in the right direction. 4. Creating a strategic plan that outlines how you plan to accomplish your business goals. And 5. Implementing and monitoring your business plan to make sure you are staying on course. In this context, before you decide to add a new enterprise on your farm or scale up your production, you want to refer back to what you stated in your business plan and make sure this decision squares with your long-term business and lifestyle goals. For successful production planning on the farm, you have to begin at the end. In order to know how much you should grow, you need to have an idea of how much you can sell. A little bit of excess production is fine, but you don't want to be spending a significant amount of time and resources growing crops that won't sell. It all comes down to knowing the demand. As a new grower selling at the farmer's market, it can take a few years to develop a good sense of how much you are able to sell on a given market day. But eventually you'll get the sense of how much produce you should bring with you to market. Still, a rainy day or sporting event can really throw off the number of customers attending the market and how much produce you are able to move. CSA shares offer another way to guarantee sales and better anticipate how much produce you should grow. With customers picking up their shares every week, you're able to plan how much of each product will go in that CSA basket for each week of your CSA season. This lesson won't go into all the details of CSA planning, but the production planning techniques that I describe will apply to a CSA farm as well. If you are scaling up into wholesale accounts, production planning is absolutely critical. Most wholesale buyers will create a contract or sales agreement that is based on a specific quantity of product, so anticipating the demand for product is fairly straightforward. But if you as the grower are unable to deliver on that agreement, either because of harvest delays or falling short of your production goals, it can have serious financial implications and can undermine your ability to continue to sell to that buyer. Communicating with buyers or stakeholders to have a clear understanding of their expectations for product quantity, type, and quality is very important. For example, when I was working with the Fayetteville Public School District's Farm to School program, I learned that they were wanting to buy long Asian type eggplants because that shape fit better in the food processing equipment they used. I would have assumed they would have wanted a more traditional Italian type like Galen for their produce order without understanding the end use and their specific needs. Your ability to anticipate consumer demand and meet production goals greatly depends on the type of records you have kept from previous seasons. You may have a feel for how much you need to grow to bring to the farmer's market on a given Saturday, but the only way to really know how much you sell is to write it down or track sales electronically. Good sale records will not only help you anticipate market demand, but will help you know which crops are the most profitable for your operation. The off-season offers a great opportunity to pull back from the daily grind of running a farm, get some perspective, and start planning for the next season. Entering the new production season with a plan for when you will start crops, how much space to allocate, and what your harvest targets are will help you stay on track and achieve your goals. I will be focusing on annual crop planning in this lesson, but keeping in mind a long-term rotational plan for your farm is also very important. A long-term plan can be a rough sketch of general crop rotations over the course of 5 to 10 years, but being able to fit the annual production plan into the long-term rotation plan is very important for the sustainable management of your farm. The ATRA publication, Planning for Profit in Sustainable Farming, which is available on our website, will help guide you through the planning process to ensure your farm is able to stay financially viable. A good place to start with record keeping is to record your weekly sales at market. Being able to divide out produce sales by crop is ideal, but simply keeping track of total sales at the end of the day is a good start. If you record how much of each crop you bring to market and how much of each crop you have at the end of the day, that will enable you to calculate how much you sold of each product. Also, taking note of which products sell out first will give you a good idea of which items are in high demand and which crops you could increase production of. If you don't sell at a farmer's market, keeping a paper trail of sales to grocery stores, restaurants, or wholesale accounts will help you anticipate future demand and set production goals. Or, if you run a CSA, keeping record of how much of each item you included in the share each week will help you plan better for next year. You can also keep more fine-tuned records to improve the profitability of your operation and of specific enterprises. For each crop you grow, keeping specific records on inputs, labor, and tractor time will help you understand the true cost of production. Comparing this number to the gross revenue from sales for each of these crops will allow you to calculate your profit margin and determine if you should be growing more or less of the crop to improve your farm's profitability. InCAD offers a series of basic farm accounting and record-keeping templates that you can download and use on your own farm. Also, the Veggie Compass Whole Farm Profit Management System is a very useful tool for enterprise budgets and accessing financial performance. You'll find links to these templates in the resources page we post after the webinar. To illustrate these crop planning principles, let's walk through an example. Imagine that you are a tomato grower wanting to sell tomatoes to your local farm-to-school program. You learn that your local school district is looking to buy 20,000 pounds of slicing tomatoes throughout the fall semester at $1.60 per pound. You've already been growing half an acre of stake tomatoes on your farm, so you figure you could expand your tomato operation to supply 10,000 pounds to the school district between mid-August and mid-October. At $1.60 per pound, that would be an additional $16,000 in farm revenue. Let's assume you've already been keeping records on the cost of tomato production, and you know that you can make a decent profit margin on these tomatoes selling at $1.60 a pound. Also, you've saturated the demand at the farmer's market, so you're looking for additional markets to sell produce into. And you've been growing some good hybrid cultivars that give you a good yield with consistent quality that will meet the school district standards. The next question is how much you should plant. We've already discussed the fact that you should know the market demand and have a production goal in mind. But to know how much to plant to meet those goals, you need to be able to anticipate yield. This could be the anticipated yield per plant, per 100-foot row, or per acre, but you need to have a number to start with. If you've already been keeping production records, that is the best place to start. But if you don't have that kind of data on your own farm's production, then you can find production estimates from your local extension office or land-grant university. No matter how experienced of a grower you are, it's a good idea to account for a crop loss factor of 10 to 25%. It's always better to overestimate how much you should plant than end up short, especially if you are trying to meet a contract or agreement. You'll need to estimate how much land to devote to this crop based on those production estimates. So depending on your scale of production, you'll calculate the number of plants, rows, or acres to set aside. And you'll also need to figure out how much seed to purchase in order to make the crop. So going back to the tomato example, you have the production goal of 10,000 pounds of tomatoes. To begin with, you need a yield estimate. For the variety you're growing, you estimate the yield at 5 pounds per plant, or 24,200 pounds per acre. This is based on the experience you have growing this variety on your own farm in previous years. You plant your tomatoes at 6 feet row spacing with 18 inches between plants, so you calculate that to be 4,840 plants per acre. In the Johnny Seed Catalog and on their website, there's a helpful chart that will give you the number of row feet in an acre depending on the spacing between rows. You'll find a link to this chart in the resources list. You can use the chart to find out that there are 7,260 row feet in an acre when the rows are 6 feet apart, which allows you to determine that you need 4,840 plants per acre when the plants are spaced at 1.5 feet apart. Although you're using production estimates based on your own records, you still need to add in a crop loss factor of 25% just in case. So that means you're going to target your production to 12,500 pounds of tomatoes. Now let's calculate how much land you will need to set aside to grow this tomato crop. We've already determined that we are expecting 5 pounds per plant, or 24,200 pounds per acre of production from these tomatoes. So you can divide the production goal of 12,500 pounds by the yield prediction of 24,200 pounds per acre to arrive at 0.52 acres required for the crop. If it is helpful to know the row feet required, you can multiply 0.52 acres by the value 7,260 row feet per acre, which we pulled from the Johnny's chart, to arrive at 3,775 row feet. If you know your rows are a certain length, you can divide this number by the row length to know the number of rows you will need. Next, you'll calculate how many plants you'll need. There are several ways to arrive at this number. A simple method is to take your yield goal of 12,500 pounds and divide it by the yield per plant of 5 pounds per plant, which will give you 2,500 plants. Or you can take the planted acreage of 0.52 acres and multiply it by the plant density of 4,840 plants per acre to arrive at 2,517. You can also take the number of row feet and divide it by the plant spacing of 1.5 feet between plants to arrive at 2,517 plants. The last two methods will give you a more accurate number, but any of these calculations are close enough. Since you'll be growing out these tomato transplants yourself, you'll need to figure out how much seed to buy. Another rule of thumb that applies here is to add 20% to the seed order to account for germination failure. If the germination rate of your seed is less than 80%, you'll want to add on a little more here. It's always better to have a little extra seed than not enough. You can multiply the number of plants, 2,517, by 1.2, which adds on 20%, and arrive at 3,021 seeds. If you need that number in ounces, you can multiply 3,021 seeds by the seed weight of tomato, which is 7,400 seeds per ounce, to arrive at 0.41 ounces of seed. Most seed catalogs will tell you the seed weight if you need to make that calculation yourself. Now that you know how much land to set aside and how much seed to order, you'll need to figure out when to plant the crop. To arrive at the planting date, we are going to start at the date of harvest and work backward. The days to maturity, also known as DTM, provided by seed catalogs, can be a good reference. But this number won't be as accurate as a number you generate from your own farm records. A crop will likely mature at a slightly different rate on your farm compared to the farm where the seed company has grown out the crop, especially if the seed company is in a different zone. So there is no data like your own data. Warmer temperatures in general will cause crops to mature more rapidly, while cooler temperatures will usually cause crops to mature more slowly. Another thing to keep in mind about the DTM number is that it is cultivar dependent, which means that it can vary between different varieties of the same crop. You can take advantage of this for succession planning purposes, which I'll discuss more on the next slide. You will also need to account for the amount of time your crop will spend in the greenhouse. The time plants spend in the greenhouse from seeding until transplanting is usually not accounted for in the DTM provided by a seed catalog, so you'll need to add that time in to your calculations. Most transplants take 4 to 6 weeks to grow out in the greenhouse, but you should use as accurate a number as you can for your planning purposes. Another consideration is how long your crop will hold in the field. Does it have a short or long harvest window? And is it a crop that is harvested all at once, or is it harvested repeatedly over a time interval? A good example of a crop that is harvested all at once with a relatively short harvest window is head lettuce. A spring greens mix is harvested over a longer time interval, on the other hand, since it can be harvested as cut and come again, with multiple cuttings before the crop is finished. Winter root crops like carrots and turnips are an example of crops that have a very long harvest window, since they will keep in the ground from late fall into the winter. So going back to the tomato example, we want to calculate when to start our tomatoes in the greenhouse and when to plant them out in the field. We plan to make our first sale to the school district on August 15th, so we will need to count back from there. Our hybrid tomato variety has 72 days to maturity from transplanting, so counting backward from August 15th, we would need to transplant the tomatoes on June 4th to meet that first harvest goal. We also need to account for the 6 weeks that tomato transplants will be growing out in the greenhouse, so that takes us back to a seed starting date of April 23rd. Now we need to consider the fact that we will want to be harvesting tomatoes for a 9-week interval, from August 15th until October 20th. The determinate cultivar that we are growing sets a determined amount of fruit, which will ripen over the course of 3 weeks, which means we will need to have a succession of 3 plantings in order to spread the harvest over a total of 9 weeks. If we start at the seeding date of April 23rd and add 2 more seeding dates in 3-week intervals, that gives us additional seeding dates of May 14th and June 4th. For this example, we are choosing to grow only one cultivar, so we will have to spread out the planting dates to achieve an extended harvest window. Another technique, however, is to plant different varieties of the same crop with different days to maturity. This method takes a little more experience and practice to achieve consistent production over an extended period of time. But in theory, if we planted all of our crop on the same date, but they were 3 cultivars that had, for example, 72, 102, and 132 days to maturity, then we could also achieve a successional harvest that lasted 9 weeks. The difficulty with managing this strategy is that cultivars will have different yield potentials and harvest windows of different lengths. But with experience, this can be a successful way to achieve successional harvests. For more information on succession planting, see the ATRA publication, Scheduling Vegetable Plantings for Continuous Harvest. This slide is a summary of the production plan that we created for our farm-to-school tomato crop. For the 2,517 plants we determined that we needed to meet our production goal, we multiplied by 1.2 to add 20% to account for the germination rate, and divided by 3 since we will plant in 3 successions. That gives us seed starting dates of April 23rd, May 14th, and June 4th, when we will start 1,000 seeds in the greenhouse and 20 plug flats, assuming that we use 50 cell flats. With this information, we know how much greenhouse space this tomato crop will use and can make plans accordingly. When it comes to field planting dates, we have calculated 3 dates when we will plant those tomato transplants out in the field: June 4th, June 25th, and July 16th. On each date, we will be planting 839 plants in 1,259 row feet. As we are planting also spring and summer crops on our farm, we will keep in mind the number of rows required for this crop and make sure that it will be available for our tomatoes when it is time to plant. Since this is a late crop of tomatoes, we could incorporate a winter cover crop into the rotation to precede the tomato crop, and possibly fit in a short season summer cover crop like buckwheat to go before the last succession of tomatoes. This kind of basic planning can go a long way in ensuring you are able to meet your production goals and fulfill wholesale contracts and agreements. The exercise can also help you determine whether or not you have the ability to take on a large wholesale order by giving you a good idea of the space and resources required to make the crop. There are many other free resources available to assist you in crop planning. All the resources that I reference can be accessed through the resources guide we will post. Many of the resources I mentioned today can be found on the ATRA website, which is home to hundreds of publications on sustainable agriculture topics. Crop Planning for Organic Vegetable Growers is a fantastic book on the subject, written by Frederick Thuralt and Daniel Brisbois, that provides template spreadsheets that can assist in record keeping and planning on your own farm. These spreadsheet templates are available to download for free from the Canadian Organic Growers website, cog.ca. Just search for crop planning on their website, and the download links will be listed next to the description of the book. Johnny Selected Seeds also has free downloadable templates on their website that can assist with crop scheduling and succession planning. Visit their website at johnnyseeds.com and look for the online tools and calculators link. The Growing Small Farms website, hosted by North Carolina State University Extension, has downloadable spreadsheets available for CSA crop planning and scheduling. These sheets were developed by Dr. Joel Groover when he managed the organic demonstration farm at the Center for Environmental Farming Systems in Goldsboro. These forms provide a good reference point for harvest date and yields goals for growers in the southeastern U.S. and can be adapted to fit your specific conditions. UC Santa Cruz also has developed a CSA crop planning curriculum that is available to download as a PDF from the linked address. This material will walk you through the steps of planning for a 100-member CSA, along with helpful examples and templates. There are numerous computer programs and apps available for purchase that have been developed to aid in crop planning and record keeping, which you may want to investigate. Most of them provide for a free trial period, which would allow you to try before you buy. However, a free open-source crop planning program was developed with support from MOFGA, Fedco Seeds, and Northeast SARE, and is available at the link at the bottom of the slide. Here's an example of the sales projection form provided by COG on their website. This form allows you to project out weekly sales on your farm by each crop. You will find a direct link to download this template in the resources page we post. The spreadsheet is formatted to automatically calculate your sales in dollars based upon the price and quantity that you enter. For this example, I have entered in our sales projections for tomatoes sold to the school district, in addition to lettuce and kale that we could also sell to the program. You can see that weekly sales are summed at the bottom of each week's column, and total sales are summed in the column on the right. A very important aspect of this kind of sales forecasting is that it can help you generate a cash flow statement. When looking at your weekly or monthly sales projections, in addition to your monthly expenses, you can get a good idea of your monthly profit margin and if you will need to retain profits from previous months to cover for months on the farm when your cash flow is negative. For example, you may need to save a portion of end-of-year profits to pay for seed, fertilizer, and labor expenses in the spring before you start bringing product to market. Here are two more forms from COG that are very helpful in crop planning. The table at the top of the slide allows you to create a planting schedule for multiple crops on your farm. In this case, I've only entered the information for our farm-to-school tomato crop. The sheet allows us to include important information like the number of rows per bed, the in-row spacing, and the amount of bed feet that will be planted on each planting date. When you enter the standard length of your beds, the sheet will automatically calculate the number of beds required for the crop. This type of sheet is especially helpful when you will be succession planting a crop. The table at the bottom of the slide is the greenhouse worksheet. This spreadsheet would ideally include all the crops you will be starting in the greenhouse that season. The spreadsheet is designed to assist you in counting backwards from the field planting date to the greenhouse seeding date. It also includes useful information for the crop, including bed length to be planted, rows per bed, and the crop spacing within the row. On the right-hand side of the table, there is information regarding the number of trays needed for each planting. That information is duplicated on the far right for crops that will be potted up from their seedling plug trays. In the case of this tomato crop, we will start each planting in 23 50-cell trays, and then pot them up into 39 24-cell trays to allow them to size up before planting them out. By filling out this sheet for all of your transplanted crops, you will be able to anticipate the number of trays you will need to have on hand and the amount of bench space you will need to allocate in the greenhouse. I hope that this has been an informative introduction to crop planning on your farm. Remember that your success as a farm depends in large part on your ability to match production to demand. And crop planning is an essential way to ensure that you are able to meet your production goals and fulfill wholesale agreements. Please refer to the resources page we post online for additional information, and don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions. At this time, I'd be happy to take questions from our audience.
Thank you, Luke. I know that's a lot of great information, and as we are in winter season where folks are planning and getting ready for the next planting season, this is a great time to think about scaling up production and meeting some of those larger contracts. So great information. Just want to remind all of our attendees, if you have any questions at this time, you can enter them into the questions box on your screen, and we will take a few moments to answer some of those questions. Let's see. One question that came in, Luke, was just asking quickly about the difference between, you mentioned that a market wanting the Asian type of eggplant, and if you could just expand on that a little more about what that market was looking for.
Sure. Um, right, so that example was based on the work I did with the Farm to School program at Fayetteville Public Schools. And the public school district was wanting to purchase local eggplants for processing. Um, they were going to be chopping and flash freezing those eggplants, and the type of processing equipment they were using was designed for carrots and other, longer crops. So it worked out better for them to buy longer, narrower Asian type eggplants just because of the processing equipment they were using. Um, so that was an example where they were having to ask for a specific type of um, variety with certain characteristics when they were ordering from local growers. So I'm just citing that example to demonstrate that it's very important that you communicate with your buyers just to make sure you're both on the same page with um, what they're looking for in the produce you're growing.
Great. We've had a few questions come in about different record keeping softwares or places to store data. So Luke, if you would just expand on that a little bit more, I think that would be helpful for several folks.
Sure, definitely. Um, yeah, so there are many cloud-based software programs available to assist in farm record keeping. Um, I'll start off by just mentioning again the free programs that I mentioned in the slides. Um, there's a program simply called Crop Planning, um, which I included the link to on the resources page. Let me just quickly go back to that. So at the bottom of this page, you can see that's the web address for that free crop planning program, which is open source. Another free resource on planning, record keeping, and also financial management is called Veggie Compass. And this was developed by University of Wisconsin, and it's available at veggiecompass.com. And that package is more for profit management and financial record keeping. When it comes to general farm records, there's a program called Ag Squared, which is a commercial software package, which ranges from $99 to $800 a year, depending on your plan. But this software package allows you to keep farm records either from your mobile device or your computer. It also assists you in management and record keeping. And that's available at agsquare.com, so you can learn more about that program there. Another program that's available for purchase is called Farmers Web, and this program is more of a platform for sales and ordering especially communicating with wholesale buyers or even you know direct consumers, retail consumers, um, and this program can be accessed at farmersweb.com, and the price for that ranges from $40 to $75 a month. And that also has a record keeping component, but um, it's mostly for the sales side and invoicing and ordering and communicating with buyers. It also allows you to post products online so potential buyers can see what you have to offer and just order from you online. There's another software package called COG Pro, which is record keeping for organic certification. And this is specifically for certified organic businesses. Um, and it essentially allows you to input all the information you would need in order to maintain records for your certification. Um, and that's available at cog-pro.com. That's COG as in certified organic. Um, the price for that ranges from $80 to $160 a year, depending on the type of plan. Beyond those software packages specifically for farm record keeping, there are some kind of more generalized tools available to you, including Google spreadsheets or Google Docs and Dropbox. Those are two cloud-based services that can allow you to create your own custom spreadsheets that allow you to keep the records you need, save them on the cloud, and then access them from mobile devices. And for my own farm records at home, I create an Excel spreadsheet and then save it to my Dropbox account so that I can access it from my iPad or my iPhone and look at records on the go. So there are a few options for you there. There are more software packages than the ones I mentioned, but those are probably the most common.
Great, thanks, Luke. Okay, we've had a couple of questions come in about where is the best place to find current prices for vegetables, both locally and even on a national level. Are there places you can look to get an idea for price per pound?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, so prices can be very regional. So I first recommend for you to talk to friends and neighbors you have who are growing the crops you're interested in growing and try to get a sense of what the local market price is. Um, I would say that'd be the first place to start. But um, if maybe you don't have those resources or looking for another source of information, um, the USDA AMS, that's Agriculture Marketing Service, offers wholesale price indexes, which they essentially look at the prices given at terminal markets, terminal produce markets like the Kansas City market, Chicago market, um, and that'll give you a good idea of what conventional wholesale prices are. For organic growers, you're going to be getting a premium even at wholesale. And Rodale in Pennsylvania actually maintains an organic price index. I don't have the web address for that, but if you Google, you know, Rodale Institute organic vegetable prices, you should be able to pull it up. So those are two sources I would use if you're looking for kind of national data on wholesale pricing.
Thanks. Another good question came in. Hopefully you have some tips, but could you touch on what one would do in the case of an uncontrollable element like weather causing you to fall a week behind on your schedule, and especially when you're thinking of, meeting this wholesale contract?
Yeah, that's where communication with that buyer is key. And if you can tell that the crop is not maturing, um, at the pace that you expect it to. If you can see that you're looking like you're a week behind, I would say as soon as you can tell that it looks like you're not going to be able to deliver, on the agreed upon date, call that buyer, talk to them. Hopefully they would be understanding. Um, I know that, from my work with the Farm to School program in Fayetteville, the produce buyer, she understood the constraints that local growers were under, and she would usually hedge her bets by buying the same product from multiple growers, just to, uh, you know, prevent instances like this where, one grower having certain weather delays or, maybe um, crop loss due to a disease that wouldn't totally wipe out her ability to buy that product. So, I would think most buyers who are used to buying from local growers understand the constraints that growers are under and would very much appreciate just being, kept up to date on what's going on. I mean, if it's something you can't fix, the best you can do is just, tell your buyer as soon as you know, and hopefully they'll be able to work with you on that.
Great. Okay, another question that's come in, and we've had a couple similar, so I'll try to paraphrase here. Um, so how would you approach crop planning for the first year of a new farm that's starting up in a community that's new to the farmer and where there's no available data in the market, or farm sales or demand in your area? And there was another question about how can you determine the market need, first year in your area? Do you just have to wait and figure it out, or are there some good things you can do to kind of determine market need even if you haven't sold anything yet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, you know, in that circumstance, I would say use your, best guess, best judgment. Um, there is a lot of information out there on a good mix of crops to grow for a CSA, for example, and that UC Santa Cruz resource that's listed on the resources page that I have displayed right now. Um, they actually have a list of crops and also the amount of each crop to grow for a 100 member CSA, and that would give you at least a good starting point to look at what types of crops, what kind of crop diversity, um, the quantity of each that you should be planting um, to meet as well as you could kind of the year-round demand or seasonal demand of your customers. If you have nothing else to go on, that would be a good place to start. Also, you might want to do some succession planting, but I would say if this is your first year, keeping it simple, growing just a few different varieties of each crop, focusing on the standard crops, the most popular crops, and the area where you're located, starting with those and seeing what sells. I mean, um, I think, as a first year grower in a new market, you're doing a lot of market research that first year that you're growing, and just be sure to always, take notes, be sure to keep sales records, and just, think about the first year as a year of market research and really seeing what that consumer demand is and what types of crops really sell in your market. Um, but as I mentioned, looking at some kind of CSA planning tools like this UC Santa Cruz um, crop planning tool that I provided um, would be a good reference point for you to get started.
Okay, another question that came in is, we've been selling at farmers markets and are just now exploring wholesale options. What kind of prices can you expect to get from wholesale sales compared to retail?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the wholesale buyer, but usually you're looking at 50 to 60% of the retail price is going to be the wholesale price. Um, if you're fortunate enough to have a wholesale buyer, say, maybe a natural foods grocery store or an organic foods grocery store um, that can offer a slightly higher wholesale price. It might be a little higher than that, but usually that's what you're looking at is 50 to 60%. Um, so it can be a significant cut to what you're used to selling at retail, but you're able to move a lot more product and you don't have as much overhead in terms of your time, your labor marketing the product. Um, and it can really be worth it, especially in a kind of a more diversified marketing approach where you're keeping both retail sales and wholesale accounts. But like I said, you're looking at 50 to 60%.
All right. Another question is, if you haven't grown a crop before, how can you estimate the yield taking into account crop loss impacts and other things? And we had another question too about, where can you find information about yields per plant? So just a little bit, if you could touch on some of those topics.
Sure, certainly. Um, so if this is your first year growing a crop, I would not recommend you um, wholesaling that crop, or at least not creating any wholesale agreements or sales contracts. It might be something where you have a buyer who's willing to take any extra you have um, without, having a specific quantity that's being ordered. I would definitely hold back from promising to sell any amount of the crop if this is your first time growing it. Um, but if you're looking for, yield estimates just to give you a sense of how much you should be expecting to harvest from that crop, that's when you definitely need to look for local resources. Um, most land-grant universities and extension programs have uh, fact sheets and bulletins on production in your area, and you can go off those numbers. Um, if that's uh, say for conventional production and you're organic, um, your production might be a little lower, or if you're a new grower, your production might be a little lower than that. So, maybe if this is your first time growing a crop, you have no experience, maybe, set the bar at 75% of what that yield standard is, or what the average yield is in your area. Um, but besides your county extension, um, local extension office, I would also ask neighbors. See if there's anyone in your area who's also growing the crop. What kind of yields they're expecting. Um, that's also a very good reference point. This is something that's very regional specific, so um, you're going to have to look at more local resources for that information.
Great. We had just a couple of comments come in that I wanted to share. Uh, Today attending is John Hendrickson with University of Wisconsin, and he had just a couple of comments about some of the record keeping tools that you mentioned, Luke. And he did point out that Veggie Compass is really more of a profitability analysis tool rather than a record keeping tool, but it is a really great tool for farmers to use. And another new record keeping and planting tool that's in the testing stage right now is called Tend, and he says it looks like it's going to be a really good tool. So I know there's new tools and applications and things being developed all the time, so keep your eyes open for some of those new things, and as folks develop more tools to help us keep records and improve profitability, it's a really great thing for our small farms.
Well, great. Thanks for sharing that, Margot.
Let's see here. I think we've kind of covered most of the questions we've received. Once again, a reminder for folks, the webinar will be posted on the ATRA webpage along with the resources, a resources page. So you'll be able to get all of these links and information. And any questions that you have and you sent in through the webinar, or if you send in later via the ATRA website, the Ask an Ag Expert, we will answer all of those questions, our Sustainable Ag Specialist. And once again, before we close out here, just a reminder: as you sign out of the webinar, there's a short survey, and we would really appreciate it if you would complete that survey. It does help us plan webinars in the future and help us improve the content that we're delivering. So thank you, Luke, for this really great information and good planning discussion. And thank you all attendees for joining us today and for your great questions. So once again, you can find this information again on the ATRA web page. And thank you for joining us today.